welcome everyone. Welcome to our first Friday Ask Me Anything with the Osborne Group. I'm Robert Osborne, I'm principal of the Osborne Group, and I am joined by my colleagues, Karen Osborne and Laurel McCombs. Hello, Karen. Hello, Laurel.
Hi, Bob. Hi, everybody.
So the way this works is you can ask us anything, fundraising related, and we will do our best to answer any questions that you have. Karen has suggested that maybe we try doing actual spoken questions. So I'm up for that if you guys are. So you can ask questions in one of three ways. You can either use the Q&A, you can type into the chat, or you can raise your hand. And will we be able to see that, Laurel? I'm not sure.
Yeah, it's like this, right? I just raised my hand.
Right, but can you raise your hand if you're not a panelist? I don't know.
I believe so. I think it'll show up in the
okay
side.
Let's try it. Oh, look, Lisa Sampels raised her hand. Was that a test, Lisa, or do you really want your hand so you can raise your hand and we can thank you, Lisa, and we can unmute you and answer questions that way. So any questions? I know, Lisa, you had sent us a question. It was kind of long, so maybe you would like to just let us know what, well, maybe let the group know whatever you're interested in knowing, and maybe narrow the question down a little bit, or get to the meat of it, or however you'd like to handle it.
Here she comes.
Shoot.
We can hear you.
We can hear you, Lisa.
Sorry, I can't see you anymore. Hi, Osborne Group. Thank you for all the great things that you've helped me with recently.
You're welcome.
So my question was, I was reading an article, and of course I don't have it handy, about all the ways that development officers suppress donor giving, by asking them for pledges, by asking them for a commitment in a year. Basically, the article listed all the ways that I would actually go about soliciting a gift or asking for a gift. So I was wondering what ways people were finding success and continuing to engage donors regularly with requests, so you weren't suppressing giving.
Do you remember who, Lisa, do you remember who the article was from? Do you know do you remember the source?
I'm looking, I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
I've been trying to read a lot lately, and I need to get more organized with all of my content. If you give me a minute, I can get it.
No, that's okay.
So Lisa,
right.
I've got it up here. It's actually from Veritas, who, and I will just say I love Veritas.
I do too.
Do amazing things. And I think what's important about that article is the intent of the article. I don't think that what Jeff Schreipels is trying to say in that, I did read the article that you forwarded to us. He's not kind of trying to say don't do these things, but I don't disagree with anything he had in that article, because I think essentially we, pledges and annual fund, and I'm trying to look at the other things he listed in this article, membership programs, giving clubs, campaigns, right? Those were kind of the 5 things. Those are all really standard things that we use in development, structures that we use to coordinate giving, encourage giving. But I do think that people, no pun intended, rest on their laurels a bit with those things, right? I think we also have a tendency to use them as ways to not ask people for gifts at capacity. I think, we use things like these structures of giving clubs to say, oh, well, this feels to me like a safe way to ask for $500, when really I should be asking them for $5,000, right? And I think in a lot of ways, pledges, people will, what I see happening with multi-year pledges is, in reality, what we should be doing is saying, okay, great, $1.5 million over 3 years. But we should be revisiting those donors in year 2 and year 3 to say, you know what, we have this really exciting thing that's happening. I'd love for you to consider increasing your gift. But people don't do that. That's not reality, right? What a lot of people do is they say, great, done, check it off the box, we got 1.5/3, and then they don't go back to that donor until after year 3. And so I think what Jeff was trying to say was, it's not that these things are bad, it's just that our tendency in using them is to just kind of use it as like the easy way out, and then we end up not getting the gifts that we really could be getting from our donors.
And I would just add to that about memberships. Museums especially use a lot of memberships, and boy, does that suppress giving, because it's so transactional. This is how much it costs to be a member. And so that's what you get. And I see people using that kind of transactional fundraising with boards as well. You have to be $1,000 donor to be on our board. Cut off. That's it. So here's my 1,000, my membership. So I agree with everything that Lisa said. And I do love that group. They write that they focus on major gift fundraising, and their blog is excellent. But it's the whole idea of making sure that we do the good stewardship, we build the relationships, we ask for increased gifts. The best gift your best next gift is from somebody who's already pledged, giving, member, whatever it is.
Right. Yeah. I don't know if I have a lot to add to that, but that was my impression in reading the article as well, is that it was a way of getting your attention and making sure that you weren't complacent in just using those structured ways of getting gifts, and just not going beyond that and just kind of leaving it there. Although I think, Karen, your point about membership, I think membership is one of those areas where the Osborne Group is where we kind of say you're doing it wrong to a lot of different groups, because I'm a member of a number of different museums and parks and things, and I just do my membership. I would be happy to give more money to almost all of them, but I get so much more just being a member that what's the point? And I get nothing from giving. I get a thank you, and that's about it. So I don't know. It's an interesting area that hasn't changed in forever, and I'm not totally sure why it is that way, but it does seem very, very consistent. Absolutely, Lisa, if you have a follow-up question, and then we have another question.
Okay, I'll just be brief. So my follow-up is, obviously this is a donor question, but would it make sense to ask the donor, if they would like a ask for the year? Well, I guess, why would we do that? We would just continue to engage them in opportunities. I guess I'm thinking is, Karen, for your example with the board, obviously there's usually some sort of criteria about board commitment. But I guess the board commitment would be in addition to other giving throughout the year. And I'm kind of answering my own question as I ramble on.
And it's also, the board commitment should be to be as generous as I am able to be, to be generous at my capacity. That should be the board commitment, that I will give early, because you need them to give early in the year, the fiscal year, and I will give as large a gift as I am able. And I belong to a board now, and they, expect me to make a pledge. So I give monthly, and then they expect me to support one event. I don't know how they don't listen to me, but since they do it that way, that's what I do, even though I've taught them better. So, I'm with you, Bob. Sometimes it's just easy to go with their bad practices. So you said we have another question. Thanks, Lisa. You can take yourself off the video part, or I don't know. You're still on the screen.
I think we have to control that. But
okay.
I thought we had a question, but it was more of a comment around PTA and parent committee fundraising facing similar challenges in terms of the structured approach to giving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I read a marvelous, did we have another question in the queue?
Nope. You can go
Okay.
ahead while we wait for questions. But please type your questions in and or raise your hand or whatever works best for you. Okay, go ahead, Karen.
So I read this marvelous article by Rory Green. Do you know her? So she wrote, and I apologize for the phone ringing in the background. She wrote an article about how to connect with your program staff, how to turn your program staff into, just the best friends you've ever had. And she gave, these 5 tips for doing it, and they all can become fundraisers. And I would love to hear Laurel and Bob's experience and how you've worked with that program staff so that they don't feel that dreaded, oh, it's the fundraiser. They get really scared, because when we have partners throughout the organization, we know that fundraising thrives. So do you have any thoughts on that to share with our viewers?
Bob, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, this is something that I've certainly faced back when I was doing direct fundraising. I think what I always use was kind of the champions model that we use in general, where I try to find a few people who either kind of got it, understood why philanthropy was so important, why everyone needed to be involved, or could easily be made to understand why that was the case, and work directly with them as an example, essentially. So really working with them directly, having them talk about their own experiences in staff meetings, but also kind of hoping that they would also just spread the word amongst their colleagues, and just the fact that because they were so actively involved, they tended to get more money, not as a reward, but it was just easier to fund the projects that they were involved in because they were really involved. And ultimately, that's kind of, I would say, what persuades people when people see that, oh, there's a benefit to me, there's a benefit to the organization for doing this work. And then I also had an internal stewardship plan. I really thought through how to not just have a stewardship plan for my for my donors, but how was I going to steward my the program staff? Because the organization I'm thinking of had no real history of the staff being involved in fundraising, and it was important because what the work that they did was very complicated, and it wasn't something that I was going to be able to describe beyond sort of a high level. So I thought it was important for them to be involved, and found some champions and made a plan internally, and then executed on it. And it took maybe a year to 18 months, but within that period of time, we had people going on major donor visits and helping, speaking at events and coming to events, and it was very successful. So I don't know what's been your experience, Laurel.
No, I mean, I think all of the above. I think one of the core things to remember is there are 2 common perceptions amongst program staff. I think one is that when we say fundraising, that it means something very specific to them that isn't necessarily but we have to remember that that's their perception, right? That when we say, oh, come help with development or come help with fundraising, they're immediately gonna think we want them to go ask for money. So you have to address the perception, right? You can't just skim over the perception and say, no, that's not what I'm talking about, and kind of move on. I think the other perception is that we as fundraisers don't always get them money for the things they really need money for. And I think there's a frustration on the program side of that we are asking them, again, these are perceptions, not necessarily reality, but perception is reality. And so I think there's a perception by program staff that we're just gonna come ask them what they need money for, but then write a grant for whatever the funder wants us to write it for anyway. So why bother? And then we're just gonna come back and ask them to report on things that they're not doing, right? I think these are common perceptions. And I think these perceptions are out there because that in some organizations, that is how it works, right? That you do have fundraisers writing grants for whatever it is the funder says they want to fund, and then program staff pulling their hair out because they're being asked to report on programs that they're not doing, right? And that's a real live push-pull. And so I think, to Bob's point about champions, I think it's also us like taking responsibility for overcoming the assumptions and the perceptions. We have to take time to do that. We have to like have real conversations with people and say, I get it. I get why you feel XYZ, and here's why I'm going to make this different. And here's why. And I love what Bob said about proving the benefits, right? Like, why does it behoove you, program staff, to work with me? And it's because I am going to get you funding for the things you really want to do. And I am going to find ways for you to be incorporated into this process that make you feel proud of the work you do, that give you a chance to talk about the things you're passionate about, and also help me at the same time. So I think it's recognizing where people are and then working with them to overcome any kind of roadblocks that they have.
That is excellent. And the other thing that Rory mentioned in the article that I was so happy to see is she said, remember to ask them strategic questions.
Yeah.
Remember that this is a relationship that you're building. And she actually listed some recommended questions to, inquire about them. This is a relationship. And if you're, as you build external relationships, you've got to build internal relationships and apply the same kind of rules, the same kind of, the things that we know work, the proven practices. Yeah.
Right. Do we have any more questions? You guys must have some questions.
Yes, you came here. You came
Right.
here with a question.
You must have some questions.
What are you struggling with right now? What's going on? What's not working as easily as it should? What are you worried about as we start opening up again? And decide, are we doing things in person? Are we going to do it Zoom? And what's on your mind? No? Well, I want to talk about Zoom versus not Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah, that was actually, speaking of Veritas, they just sent a blog out today on that very, very topic.
Well, and we have a blog too. We have a blog on that topic, but from a work perspective, how to handle the hybrid office. But we've got to make decisions about donor visits. Mm-hmm. And the thing that I wanted to just share that's been on my mind is that Zoom or not Zoom, in person or phone, should not be about our convenience. It should be what's strategically right for the donor. So it's not that Zoom visits aren't good, because we know they work. They are working. People are giving gifts over, and you can bring, and the thing that's great about them is you can bring other people without having to fly or drive. You can have a person who's the recipient there. You can have that program person there that might not have, 6-7 hours to give, but could give 45 minutes, could give an hour, because we can do it over Zoom. But it's got to be about strategy. People are also talking about, should the boards meet? Do you want them meeting in person again? Because now we've all gotten so comfortable, we board members, of not having to drive. I wouldn't have to drive an hour and a half to Orlando. I could just dial in. And there's so many committee meetings and stuff. But again, it shouldn't be based just on convenience. Yours or the board members. Yes, it could be based on the donor's convenience, but we need the staff and the board to be thinking strategically. Mm-hmm. What's right for this donor and what's right for this move.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like Karen and I also have a handful of clients who are getting really stuck because they've been pushing off big asks because they were like, we'll do it when we can be in person. And, I think that was, fair enough. Like, I think they were still doing maybe leadership level annual asks and, kind of mid-level asks, but they were kind of pushing off their major asks until they could do it in person. But now what they're facing is that they have a handful of donors who they don't want to go back to having in-person contact. Either they're elderly or, something like that. And they're like, well, what do I do? And I say, well, you've got to figure out a way to do this ask via Zoom or via the phone. And, again, and I have people who are saying, well, it's hard for me to get people on Zoom. And I say, it's not any harder to get people on Zoom than in person. We have to use the same tricks as we did with in-person visits, right? We have to make it about them. We have to give them a good reason. We have to not make it about, all the things that all of the good tricks and tips, we would offer about trying to get an in-person visit. It's no different trying to get somebody on the phone or on Zoom. And so I think it's been an excuse a little bit to not get there, but at some point you're just gonna have to figure out how to make it work.
Yeah. The only exception to that, I would say, I'm sorry, Bob, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Go ahead.
The only exception I would say to that, Laurel, as they really are, I have found out, older people, certainly older than I am, who are a little technologically challenged. But there's answers to that too. There is, let's do it together. Let me call you. Let's walk through it. It's stuff that just makes sense, and your donors are going to be grateful.
Or can you coordinate with a child, right? Can you coordinate, and what a great way to get their
grandkid over there.
And yeah, and again, I was just talking to a client recently that I said, what's the reason they have to get on Zoom with you versus the phone? And I said, you have to give them a reason. And I was like, do you have a video you want to show them? Do you have a picture is there some reason that because otherwise they're just going to say, no, just talk to me on the phone, right? And so I think, again, it's having those reasons why we've got to do it this way. And then working with them to do it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how this plays out over time. I mean, I think it's early. Anecdotally, I would say, for myself as a new board member and some advisory board members, that I found the Zoom, I just don't feel a connection with those groups the way I think I would have without it. I don't know people, I don't know their names. I can see their names in a weird way that makes me not actually remember their names, because there's that little shortcut. I don't have to commit them to memory. And I would also say for the Osborne Group, and this is very anecdotal too, I feel like a lot of the clients we've gotten over Zoom feel less locked in, less part of it. There's less of a relationship. And so I kind of wonder if as we meet new people and we enroll new people, that we'll want to meet them in person for those, to kind of establish that initial relationship. And then I think it's easier to have other kinds of contact, but we'll have to see. It's really early. I don't think we'll know for a while what this all means, but I think to both of your points, being strategic about it, thinking about, well, why am I doing it this way, is important. And I think you're both right that people tend to do what's easy. This is an easy way for us to do it, and not necessarily the best way. We do have a question. So we have a question from so pardon me if I'm pronouncing your name wrong, Alicia or Alicia. What are your thoughts on listing donors by levels of giving in annual reports? We reconsidered last year what might have been a too reactive response to conversations around diversity, equity, and inclusion. Does it inspire or exclude? So I think Laurel and I both have thought about this a little bit, and we all had a conversation about this a while ago. I don't know. I think what we landed on, and correct me if I'm wrong, was that it certainly wasn't important, I think, for us to list people by the the amount that they've given. I don't know that if it's inherently exclusive or inclusive in and of itself. But in sort of reading various articles on this, I guess for me, it struck me as, well, of all the things we do, how impactful is this? How important is it really to be listing listing people by amount versus just finding ways of recognizing people and acknowledging that they've done a good thing in other ways. So To me, it just didn't strike me as being particularly important to list the names. It didn't seem like it was something that was particularly impactful as well in the grand scheme of things. But that was my take. Did either of you have a different take?
Well, the one thing that I like is when people list it not about amount, but about impact.
Mhm.
So I've seen some really nice web sites. Cornell did this, Bob. They took it down after the campaign was over, but it was so well done, because instead of saying, "Oh, Laurel McCombs is a $25,000 donor," it said, "Laurel McCombs helped us do this." And they had a little story and a little picture. And so it suddenly made it be a powerful stewardship vehicle. And you could figure out, it wasn't hard to figure out sizes of gifts, as you looked at impact, but that wasn't the emphasis. The emphasis, and then some of the call outs, they would say, the donor would say why they did it, why this was important, and the student would say how this impacted them. And I think if we should always not make it about the money. If that should just be something you're always thinking. It's not about the money. One of our clients received the 10 million, one of the $10 million, grants from, the woman, the ex-wife.
Oh, Mackenzie Bezos.
Mackenzie, yes, got a $10 million Mackenzie grant. And they were worried that people will now think they don't need any money. And, the word's going to get out. And I mean, we're really happy, but, what's this going to do to our fundraising? And I said, just tell them what you're going to do with it and tell them that they can be a part of it. I think we just get caught up in thinking about that we're in the money business instead of we're in the impact and outcomes business.
Yeah. Yeah. And I everything Bob and Karen just said, and I think especially this idea that, what are we trying to do with our annual reports anyway? I think a lot of times we overthink annual reports and then we don't really do very much with them anyway. And so I kind of think we're putting a little more time and effort than we probably need to into some of these things. But I also think that, again, what's the outcome when you are trying to do something with your annual report? What is that outcome that you're hoping? I know one thing I will say is if you have a structure that is structured around giving clubs, then you probably need to list those, and membership, right? Then you probably need to list those giving clubs and that membership in your annual report, but you don't necessarily have to put dollar amounts to it. But if you're kind of saying, if when you ask for the gift, you're saying, and you will be in this club, then you should recognize them as part of that club. But if you don't have that, then I think it's less important. I do think at the very, very top too, I think there's some argument to be made to say that there is something to be said to putting your top donors, if they are in some kind of a club, because it may be that other potential top donors want to join that club, right? They kind of see names there and say, oh yes, I do want to be with Bob and Karen and Joe and Jill, right? And I want to be part of that club. So I can see, but again, I think there's other ways to do that. I think having Bob and Karen call Joe and Jill and say, hey, I'm in this club and you should join us, right? I think that's more effective. So the other thing I like too is thinking of other ways to recognize people. So we've talked a lot about like recognizing by loyalty. So maybe you have like, we want to, special shout out to our donors who've been giving for 10 years or longer or whatever it is. I think that's kind of a cool way to tackle it as well.
Yeah, I think the pushback on listings has been, to your point, Karen, that it's been just about the money and not about recognizing the impact that people have had and in elevating people for money and not recognizing the other contributions that people have made. And what I would add to this as well is that, to your point, Laurel, a lot of times listing in an annual report substitutes for actually running a donor program. Like that is the donor program. It's like your name gets run, as opposed to really having a stewardship plan behind those donor levels where, yes, you list them, but that is just a very minor part of a otherwise well thought out program that is built to engage and steward donors at that level, at the level that they require for that level of giving. And I think that's part of the problem as well. So we just kind of see that as like, that's the donor, that's, you know, that's our mid-level giving program, is you get your name here. And
Well, you
that's
know,
about
the other
it.
thing, I see we're almost running out of time, and I just wanted to say, there's one other thing that people, I hope no one's doing this anymore, but they used to be, those clubs used to be tied to benefits. You know, if you give at this level, you get, and I hope no one is doing that anymore.
Yes. Well, thank you, everyone. And yes, Lisa, we do have, I mean, I think all of our tools are very donor centric. And I know that word is a little freighted these days, but what we mean by that is, you know, really recognizing everybody and the contributions they make in some way, and not elevating people because of the money, like we've just been discussing, but recognizing that you do need to let donors know that there's an outcome associated with their investment, so that they make that investment again. So thanks everyone for joining us today. I don't know, I think the next one of these may be either we'll have to kind of reschedule them for not being on a Friday, or maybe we'll take a hiatus. We'll have to discuss it internally. But thanks everybody for joining us. And we will have these again, and whenever that is, we will certainly let you know. But until
Only
then,
because it's July 4th, right?
only because it's July 4th, and then I'm going to be on vacation. So, which doesn't mean you guys can't carry on. So we'll figure it out. But yes, it's because it falls on a holiday. All right, everyone. Thanks so much.
Take care, everybody.
Take
Bye-bye.
care.
Bye.